We've got a great guest for you guys. This is our 17th anniversary, and we're celebrating by having two wonderful guests today, Adam McKay and Bernie Sanders. Adam joins us now. Adam, thank you for coming in. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Been a fan for a long time.
Thank you, brother. So me too. And I didn't know it until recently, but it turns out, now I'm going over the top, but you're gonna agree with me by that here. It turns out a bit of a living legend, Adam McKay, okay?
Wow.
So, okay, hold, let me prove it to you guys. So first of all, you had me at Anchorman, you co-wrote Anchorman, it's already over, okay? Everything else is gravy, but let's keep going. Talladega Nights, The Other Guys, Step Brothers, so fine, co-wrote an amazing success. Big Short won an Oscar for it, Best Adapted Screenplay. Then he wrote, directed, and produced Vice, which we're gonna show you a little clip from in a little bit. That's the movie about Dick Cheney. And that only got 8 Oscar nominations so far. But to me, what brought the legendary status was the other stuff. So you created Funny or Die, also with Will Ferrell. And this I did not know at all. Co-founder of the comedy troupe Upright Citizens Brigade. When you put all that, like, sometimes there are people that when you look into organizations, it turns out, oh, he did that, and that, and that. Oh, he started everything. You're one of those guys.
And you forgot I founded 7-Eleven and created Yoo-Hoo. You forgot those two. Yeah.
Well, I actually did forget that you became the head writer at SNL, and I mean, it goes on, and helped to bring Tina Fey on to make her head writer, etc. So let's talk about Vice first, because it's still in the theaters. I saw it; it's amazing. Then I want to come back and talk about your career. Sure. So I'm still a little haunted by it, and so there was. It's funny because you make these movies that are so disparate in a sense. You got the Will Ferrell movies are traditional comedy. Succession on HBO. I didn't even mention that. Succession is the best show I've seen in a long time, right? You did that too. Like after everything that I watched, I'm now convinced that you were secretly doing Game of Thrones. You're just not telling anybody. Okay, but you in The Big Short and in Vice, you have a style that I've seen nowhere else. And so, am I right about that? Like, are other people saying like, oh, whoa, that's totally different?
I mean, it's always built upon previous movies and previous influences. I mean, 24-Hour Party People was a big influence for me. The Michael Winterbottom movie, American Splendor, which was on HBO. So that kind of breaking the fourth wall style also comes out of theater in Chicago, which has like a hard labor movement kind of root to it. So there's an influence to it, but yeah, I think it's unusual for today's tapestry for sure.
Yeah, because it goes from a really serious story where you're telling the story about how Dick Cheney grew up, et cetera, and a lot of things I didn't even know. And and I covered the guy for way too long. And then you break the fourth wall, and then you've got this incredibly funny, and then weird, and then and this tapestry. That's quite amazing, but the story itself is also amazing. I want to show you a part of the movie and then talk about the substance of who Dick Cheney is. So let's watch.
I am Scooter Libby, Dick's chief of staff. I'm also his national security advisor and a special advisor to the president.
Technically, Scooter outranks any of Bush's people.
Mary Madeline will serve as counselor to the VP and assistant to Bush. David Addington, Dick's main legal counsel, will play center field on all matters relating to executive power. The president has Alberto Gonzalez, Karl Rove, Karen Hughes as his team. Quite frankly, Gonzalez has no clue. Rove is a hack. Hughes should be in AA ball. So we will have fairly unobstructed access to the Oval Office. We will be automatically BCC'd on all emails that the president receives or sends, as well as have access to his schedule the second that it is set or changed.
We will also be receiving the daily intelligence briefing before the president. That gets us inside the decision curve.
Which we'll actually be reading.
Bush approved all of this?
We have a understanding.
Yeah, no, that Christian Bale's performance in that movie, it got into my nightmares. right? It was so human and so evil at the same time, and that is a very delicate balance.
I just told him the same thing. I was like, your performance is so detailed. It's so psychologically grounded yet haunting. He dialed into him. I mean, we went after this movie. We said, let's chase the mystery of Dick Cheney. Let's find out who this guy is. And we did our work on the end of the screenplay, but Bale went deep. Him and Amy Adams, because as you know, Lynn is a major part of the story of Dick Cheney. The two of them are really almost like one person. And the performances they uncorked are just breathtaking.
Yeah, and I actually did not know the depths to which Lynn Cheney controlled Dick Cheney and how much she, in a sense, created him.
It's kind of crazy. It's like when we started doing research, we interviewed people in Casper, Wyoming. And to this day, they still tell you whoever Lynn would have married would have been president or vice president. That's actually, like, to this day what they tell you. And from what we found, it seems to be true that she was really the engine for this whole thing. But she was raised in the late 50s at a time where women, in Wyoming especially, were told you can't be senator, you can't go forward.
Yeah, and so Dick Cheney, I'm telling you, I covered the guy exhaustively for 8 straight years, and I learned a lot from the movie. I didn't know to what degree he was kind of a bum earlier in life, and had terrible grades and had gotten in trouble with the law, and Lynn Cheney kind of pulled him up out of that, unfortunately. And so many of the historical movies, when people are playing that role, it feels like almost like a caricature or an impression, right? Whereas with Christian Bale, I felt like he was more Dick Cheney than Dick Cheney, and so. But let's talk about the core of what we just saw in that scene. In essence, Cheney was president for at least 6 years. The last 2 years, there was a bit of a break, right?
Off the Syria issue where, he wanted to bomb Syria. And by then, Bush had kind of woken up to the fact that he was maybe being played a little bit by Cheney. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. But is that, look, I know it's gonna sound crass, and we're both progressives, and so it's easy for us to say, but you cannot escape the fact that I almost said Donald Trump, but it makes sense in this regard, that George Bush is a person who is deeply unintelligent. Like, he got manipulated by Dick Cheney so easily and so thoroughly. That's the core of that scene. With the BC seeing everything that the president sees, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And the fact that he was getting the daily intelligence briefing before the president. I mean, the thing I point out is, like, at a certain point, reality has to be reality. And the fact is, George W. Bush had a 12-year gap in his employment record where he did nothing. Like, he clearly wasn't qualified for this job, and Cheney clearly smelled it out. And you look at that, BCC getting his schedule before him, the daily intelligence briefing, it was remarkable. I mean, I knew some of this, but when we dug into the research, we were blown away.
Yeah, no, the fishing scenes as he's reeling Bush in, just awesome. Okay, I can go on forever on that topic, but I want to talk more about your career. First of all, how'd you get started in entertainment at all?
Really, I started I was at college in Philadelphia. I was at Temple University, and stand-up comedy was exploding. And I was an English major, and we were just like, there's clubs opening everywhere. Let's go do some stand-up. You can say whatever you want into a microphone. So that was the beginning. And there were some of those guys from the early days. It was probably like 87, 88, like Paul F. Tompkins is still working and around, and a couple other guys. But that was the beginning. And then I heard about Chicago and long form improv and that whole scene with Del Close, and that changed everything for me.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into comedy when you were growing up, or you like engineer, doctor, comedy?
Like engineer, doctor, comedy.
Right.
I never really thought of it as comedy. I just thought of it as like I said, I was an English major, so I was like reading. I was like a pretentious 19-year-old who was reading, Ferdinand Celine and reading all this kind of stuff, and had a girlfriend that smoked clove cigarettes. And but comedy was the big thing. It was just accessible and kind of in front of us. And Chicago was really the interesting place where it blended it. It was like legitimate theater, comedy, politics were all kind of the same thing. And that really changed everything for me. You know, Second City and what they've done.
Yeah, and of course you were part of Second City too. Of course, right? So, so were you immediately successful?
Oh God, no. I bombed my first 6 times doing stand-up comedy. I had a guy flick bottle caps at me one time when I was on stage. I went to Chicago. I had no job. I had to dress up as I had to wear like a Fred Flintstone outfit and go to like 2nd grade classes to give like Halloween safety lectures. No, it was disastrous. It was, 3, 4 years, 5, 6 years of being like broke as the day is long. But, and then out of that came the Upright Citizens Brigade and came, Second City and all that kind of stuff.
How do you pull up out of that? What went right first?
I'm trying to remember. The first thing was, I think it was I.O., the theater that Del Close ran, where I started to be able to teach there and help improv groups. So I started to make enough that I could pay my rent. And then the big change was Second City, where all of a sudden I had a real check coming in every week. And that really changed everything. And then of course, SNL, which was mind blowing. I mean, the fact that I was in, New York City and was actually making enough to have like a 1-room apartment, I couldn't believe. So yeah, SNL was the jump. That was huge.
Yeah, it's funny. We have incredibly similar stories, except mine is without the success. Okay, but you were saying during the break that your parents were pushing you to be a lawyer and you just couldn't do it. I was a lawyer for 7 months and I just couldn't do it. And I remember getting my break in Miami, and I'm only telling this in service of the story I want you to tell about SNL. And I tried out and became an entertainment reporter for literally a day and a half, and then they fired me.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
But I was so excited at the time that I had a 1-bedroom apartment. No, not even a studio in South Beach. But then they said, "Hey, why don't you become our writer instead?" And I was devastated at the time, but it turned out that was my big break. So what happened to you at SNL?
So similar thing. I went to audition as a performer. Lorne Michaels had come to Second City, so it was incredibly thrilling. And I knew I did no impressions. I did no giant characters. I was more of kind of the straight guy. To even compare myself to Harold Ramis seems like sacrilege, but in that zone. And so I brought some of my scripts that I had written. And I finished my audition and I did okay. I was respectable. And I just right away walked up to Lorne. I was like, I'm a writer as well. And it was the smartest move I ever made. And that's how I got in.
That's funny because my co-founder here at the Young Turks, Ben Mankiewicz, he was the anchor at the time for me, and he's like, "Okay, I get it. He's not good on camera," but he's like, "I think he's kind of a hell of a writer," and he helped to get me hired back there.
God bless him.
Yeah,
God bless him.
Absolutely. And then we started the Young Turks together later. So, and we decided we were going to be progressive, and you have been wildly progressive to continue the similarities. Do you get flack for how clearly progressive you have been in your work?
It's the strangest thing because the way I came upon it was just, I wasn't raised left or right. It was just out of what was going on. So the first time I really started getting called liberal was when I was protesting the Iraq War, the one we depict in our movie. And people were saying, I was saying there's no weapons of mass destruction. I was in those marches. And people were like, wow, you're really a lefty. Not to say I wasn't involved in politics before that, but that was like the big one where I was really vocal. And I was like, why does this make me a lefty that I'm, questioning this intelligence? And from then on, that seemed to be the case where you would question things and people would say, oh, you're a progressive, you're a lefty. And I just was like, yeah, sure. But honestly, I feel like I'm pretty moderate. Like, I feel like saying they didn't find intelligence to justify that invasion, which proved to be right, is a pretty moderate, reasonable position. But long story short, yes, people call me a lefty and say I'm super lefty. So
yeah. Well, it seems like
care.
you've lived the adage of Colbert, which is that great line he had at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, that reality has a well-known liberal bias.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were just, and I've never heard a story like that. That's really interesting. Where you were like, I don't know. It seems like they got the intelligence wrong. They're like, so you're a progressive. You're like, I don't know if being correct is a progressive. I guess I'm a progressive.
I mean, I remember being at that giant march in New York City that, like, I remember one police officer telling me he thought there were 1 million people there. And there was a guy just screaming at us saying, you liberals, you lefties. And I was truly confused by it and was like, what do you mean? No, we're out here because it doesn't seem like it's legitimate. So yeah, that's kind of been the case. I don't know. I mean, I try and just go against corruption. I try and call it out wherever it's possible. At a certain point, there clearly are forces that want to call you a lefty. There's been a lot of money put into hating the word liberal, a lot of marketing dollars. So let them have at it.
Yeah, but you're also correct in your assessment that it's actually a moderate position. Your positions are, because if you look at Medicare for All, it polls at 70%. Raising taxes on the wealthy polls at over 70%, and Green New Deal polls at 81%.
Is that true? Really, 81%?
That's right.
Wow.
So your instinct, which is that, hey, these things are just obvious and logical, are true. That is the center of the country. It's just called liberal or left by Washington, the people in power, is a way of almost demeaning it because of the marketing dollars that went to calling liberal bad. Right, and so I want to just, you've got a great series on Amazon too. I want to talk about that in a second, but I know you care about the Green New Deal. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think there's no bigger issue facing mankind, maybe in our history, than global warming. I think it's clear this really is a threat. This is a threat to like literally the survival of mankind. So for them, even to be, for certain Democrats, even to be as civil to present something called as a Green New Deal, I feel like is beyond belief, because I'm in full panic mode. I'm terrified by the data I'm seeing, and I follow people like Bill McKibben and Michael Mann on Twitter and read their writings, and we're in a true emergency right now. We're in a real, legitimate scientific emergency. And the idea that anyone would play politics with this and care about lobbying dollars from oil companies, or like McConnell's talking about, he's going to get a vote against it to use it as a wedge issue, is demented. And once again, goes well beyond right and left wing. We're talking about like chemical science. We're talking about like the ability to like live and breathe on the planet. So I'm very passionate about it. We touch on it in the movie Vice. I think it's going to be one of the worst parts of Dick Cheney's legacy, is that he was very involved in killing action on global warming. And I think everyone, right, left, moderate, whatever, needs to wake up to this and really do some research on the data, because it's not hard to understand. It's very simple what's going on, and it's terrifying. Sorry I went on so long.
No, not at all. I obviously I totally agree. In fact, that combines the two themes we've been talking about here. One is all you're doing is you're citing facts. It used to be 97, now it's 99% of the world's scientists who say it's happening. And then that brings us to your potential next movie. If 99% of the world's scientists said a meteor is going to hit us in 12 years, we must knock the meteor out of this. We got to do something, otherwise we're all going to die, right? People would do something, but 99% of the world's scientists say, no, we are the meteor, right? And we're like, but we're in a movie where they're like, nah, don't worry about it. I bet you everybody whose whole livelihood is based on bringing you facts is all lying or wrong. I mean, it's just, it seems like the definition of insanity. And when you say, no, those are facts, they go, oh, liberal. Like what?
It's one of the greatest marketing advertisement jobs that's ever been done in the history of marketing and advertising. The fact that you can turn science into a point of view, into a political point of view. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Adam Curtis, his movie Century of Self, that talks about the advent of advertising and how powerful it is and how it's really defined the last 125 years of mankind. I think it's essential viewing right now. It's remarkable, like how crazy people sound when they talk about this. It really is.
Yeah. Now you've got another series that also exposes the problems in the world. It's going to be on Amazon. It's called The Giant Beast That Is the Global Economy. It's hosted by Calpen. I want to show a quick clip here.
With cell phone companies, there were auctions over bandwidth, and only a handful were able to get that bandwidth. You and I can't just start a cell phone company and just start grabbing bandwidth.
So basically, because only a few cell phone companies control all the bandwidth, they can give you terrible customer service?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you call them, the wait times, the sort of attitude, it's really clear. They are not fighting for your business.
Yeah.
Okay, so Adam, that's going to start on February 22nd. How'd you get that then? This also reveals the reality of money laundering and so many other ills that are going on in the world.
You know what's funny is we did The Big Short, and I got to work with Adam Davidson, who a lot of people would call a moderate. And he and I just hit it off. Because really what Davidson is he's a journalist and a thinker, and he's a guy who's very interested in economics and finance. And the two of us found this common thread that we both just were excited by the power that's inside this subject and the fact that it's actually wildly entertaining, and we've just been told it's boring. So out of that sort of friendship was born this idea of this show, and we teamed up with producer Eli Holtzman, and this show came out of it, and it's awesome. It's really good.
Yeah, there's all these mythologies, including one of my favorites used to be, liberals can't do talk shows because liberals can't be entertaining. But you call all of Hollywood liberal. How could we not be entertaining? It doesn't make any sense. All right, everybody check out The Giant Beast That Is the Global Economy on Amazon, coming out on February 22nd. And obviously check out Vice. It's got 8 Oscar nominations, and for good reason. Adam McKay, thank you so much for joining us. Really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me, man. Pleasure.
Like what you see? Click the subscribe button below, and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from the Young Turks.